All right, let's jump right into this. Today we're stepping into a mythic, deeply atmospheric forest to unpack a grimdark fable known as the Shadow Ledger of the Hidden Garden. This is a story where rigid, clockwork certainty violently collides with its own organic ghost. We're going to break down this fascinating narrative through the lens of a Fichtean dialectic. So we'll move from a strict thesis into a rebellious antithesis and finally land on a deeply unsettling synthesis. It's an incredible explainer on identity, power, and what actually happens when the foundation of who you think you are begins to crack.
Listen to this chilling warning that comes straight from the Hidden Garden. The denser interval was never granted permanent title. The ledger remains open. Just let that sink in for a second, right? This single quote perfectly sets the stage for a massive clash of identities. It tells us right out of the gate that the dominant force in our story, this mechanical entity we know as Big Ben, well, he might not be as permanent or as secure as he actually believes. There is an outstanding debt, an open ledger, and the past is coming back to collect.
So, let's start with our first phase, the thesis, the clockwork certainty. This establishes Big Ben's initial state of absolute dominance as he moves through the woodland.
Now you might be wondering, what exactly fuels Big Ben? He's powered by something called dark fire. These are basically concentrated wells of autonomous will. And what's wild here is their origin. They sprouted from these original violet seeds planted in a Geneva gutter. Over time, they grew into this immense, raw power source. It's this dark fire that gives Big Ben his proprietary certainty. He moves through the world as what the text calls the denser conjugation, fully believing his mechanical permanence is absolute, largely because he's running on this incredible autonomous will.
And this brings us right to the core conflict of the environment itself. Big Ben operates on a strict, rigid, mechanical tempo. But the space he's walking into, the true hidden garden, is entirely different. The thing is, only those who can register the dark fire or something called the honest pulse can even perceive this garden in the first place. To everyone else, it just looks like an ordinary woodland. Inside this concealment field, the environment is defined by irregular growth. Picture violet brass stems interwoven with living green that outright refuses any kind of strict tempo. It thrives under the dual influence of residual dark fire and the sustained, honest pulse. It's organic, it's unpredictable, and it is completely at odds with Big Ben's rigid, mechanical core.
Which sets us up for the antithesis, the organic rebellion. This is the exact moment Big Ben steps across the threshold and faces his repressed, lighter self. As Big Ben walks into the center of this irregular growth, the air actually changes. Right in front of his sensors, a figure assembles itself from the surrounding flora. We're talking leaves, sap, and residual flame cohering into the approximate shape of an entity known as Sir Brain. Now, Big Ben is experiencing genuine confusion here. This lighter conjugation, this organic ghost, has never confronted him in physical space before. And even though Sir Brain's manifestation is incomplete, kind of temporary, he carries enough continuity from a psychological realm called the Edge of Negation to actually speak. He threatens reclamation. He tells Big Ben that he will reclaim the body, even if it requires separation. Big Ben interprets this as pure antagonism, just a direct threat to undermine the only coherent self that still walks under the open sky.
So, this immediately erupts into a swift shadow struggle. Big Ben doesn't even hesitate. He strikes. His motion is fast, it's absolute, utilizing a force called absolute ice, meant to completely shatter this insolent manifestation. But it doesn't work. Sir Brain moves with the speed of a shadow, dissolving and reforming just a pace to the left. Absolute ice hits absolutely nothing but empty air. Sir Brain then circles him, examining Big Ben's denser frame with this intense, clinical attention, kind of like how a character named Alara once inspected faulty gear trains. Finally, Sir Brain reaches right in and extracts a measured portion of dark fire directly from Big Ben's core, before vanishing into shadow with a stolen flame. It is rapid, it's completely one-sided, and it is a devastatingly surgical maneuver.
The aftermath of this encounter is honestly devastating. The theft is clean, leaving a highly specific, measurable absence of dark fire inside Big Ben's core. So we're not just talking about a metaphorical loss of pride here, right? This is a literal physical compromise of his power. The flame that fuels his mechanical superiority has just been carved out of him by an organic ghost he thought was long gone.
And that drops us into our final stage, the synthesis, the erasure paradox. We're shifting from the physical battle into the profound psychological fallout as Big Ben hides in the undergrowth. Suddenly, Big Ben detects a second, unidentified presence approaching through the trees. This forces him to silence his own signature and hide deep in the undergrowth, while a clockwork owl flies above, drawing attention away.
And in this hiding spot, Big Ben has a terrifying realization about his past versus his present. He previously assumed that Sir Brain, his lighter self, was effectively obsolete software, just deleted, overwritten, done. But his present reality? Well, the confrontation in the garden suggests they're actually locked in a contested dual boot. The lighter conjugation still possesses enough continuity to project real force into the physical world and remove power.
Let's break down exactly how this doubt affects his internal architecture, because it's absolutely crucial. For a denser will that it literally never doubted its own permanence, he is now experiencing structural uncertainty for the very first time. He realizes his counterpart can still project force, which means his dominance isn't a permanent title. It's a temporary hold that's actively being mined from within. In mechanical terms, this doubt acts exactly like a soft error propagating through rigid clockwork logic. It's a soft error that just refuses to finish dying. His entire calculation of his own future survival is being fundamentally altered by this one single encounter.
And this leads us to the ultimate existential dread. If Sir Brain could be fully cancelled, Big Ben's own existence might prove contingent rather than sovereign. This is the absolute peak of his crisis. Big Ben is sitting there among the dual-grown plants, listening to the Clockwork Owl's distant call and calculating a terrifying Fichtean paradox. Think about it. What if a configuration that requires the ongoing negation of its predecessor to survive cannot actually survive that predecessor's final erasure? Meaning, if Sir Brain is ever truly and completely destroyed in the edge of negation, Big Ben might lose the very contrast that defines him. No enemy, no self.
Which leaves us with this final, haunting question. As the 13th hour stretches onward, Big Ben is forced to wonder, if the residue in the edge of negation disappears completely, would the remaining wills still have a name? Or would it become only another unmarked mechanism, just ticking away in a forest that no longer requires witnesses? It's an incredible philosophical puzzle wrapped up in a grim, dark clockwork fable. It really asks us to consider what parts of our own past we're constantly fighting and who we might become if those ghosts ever truly disappeared. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. I hope this deep dive into the Shadow Ledger gave you a whole lot to think about.